And now this is like getting a little bit more basic items. There's you have a whole range of custom fonts and colors and stylings and borders and things like that. I won't go into like all of that, but I do want to like touch on a few things here. In the so this is again like if you want to change something. So I ran a report up here. There's PO line creation not received report. There's a lot of data across it here. In some cases, like there's some of the cells are very content dense. So what you can do is you can pick your column. Like in this case, I want to actually change the item description here, and I want to modify that a little bit. So in the criteria tab, you can go across all your columns, and you can actually change each column to have a different format and style. And again, you hit the little menu button on the column. It'll drop down again the little menu here. You pick column properties. And when it opens up a little window, and the first piece is style. And so you have a whole range of things here. I don't have the whole window, I think, captured in the in that image on the left-hand side there. But you have a whole range of like you can change the style of the color of the text, the background color, borders, font size, there's a number of things like that. So in this case, what I did is because this item description column is has very content dense information. What I did is I switched it to like the font, changed the Arial narrow, and switched to size 10. And you can do a whole range of things there. And what that is, it just kind of like it just made it a little more compact. So when you're running reports, those cells aren't just like being exploded out to like large sizes. So again, this is a very sort of basic change, but it's giving you an example of like what you can do in terms of some options of what you can do in terms of customization here. Another one that's helpful, that's actually pretty easy to do, is if you have like a large report with like a huge number of columns and rows within your table, and you have like a lot of values across, and it's a little difficult to read, like as you're kind of scanning across the text. You can do what they call alternate styling. This actually is pretty easy to do. This one happens in I believe this is in the results tab. And so if you go to the table container, there's a title and table container. If you go to the table container, next to the pencil you have the little XYZ little button there. You click that, you get like a number of options here. But one I find that's pretty helpful and just easy to just quickly activate, which will immediately apply to your report. If you scroll down a little bit in that window, in this case it was a pivot table, but it's there's this row styling here at the bottom, and that's enable alternate styling. So you just check that box, and that will essentially apply. I don't know if it's easy to read on the screen or not, but what it does is essentially applies like that that every other row like sort of being like lightly shaded. And so it may be helpful to kind of like when you're looking at a report like this and you're kind of reading across like a large number of columns and rows. This may be helpful to just make the data a little bit more readable. And it's a very easy change to just click that, enable it. It's like almost like a binary state. You could throw it on. I mean, you could do this in other ways too, but I think I found that one is the most sort of like the easiest way to accomplish for something with like a very content-rich or data-rich report. And I believe this might be the last piece of formatting I think I was going to show, and that's conditional formatting. When I think I talked about this in the last session. I kind of showed a little piece of that, like in on a report that I was demonstrating. So, in some cases, what you may want to do is you may want to highlight certain certain values that maybe stand out from the rest. Like especially in this case, this is I was running a report about which had a currency column here, so a transaction amount. And you can see in this report, most of the values being displayed are essentially $85. But you are going to see sort of ones that sort of that vary from that state there. So in some cases you may want to highlight that out. You may want to if you're running a report and you have something that's really worth noting, or you really want to catch someone's eye on those pieces there, you can do conditional formatting. So in this case, I'm looking again at the transaction amount column. You hit the menu button and go to column properties. And again, you have the style column format. So if you switch over to the conditional format tab, it requires a few different steps here. But what I did is I had the column transaction amount. In this case, what I wanted to do was highlight any values which were not $85. Which most of the report was the $85 sort of standard fee down the line. But I wanted to sort of highlight. Let's say I was running a report to show someone. I wanted to highlight the other one. So what I did is you're basically in some cases creating an if-then statement. So I did what I picked is is not equal to, is not in. I put in $85 as the value. Once you do that, then once you set up your sort of if-then statement or your conditionals for that conditional formatting, you then pick after that. You then pick a how you want the formatting to respond when that value differs from essentially that $85. So in this case, what I did is I added a background color of this I don't know, purplish pink magenta sort of color in the background here. So what it does is it looks down that column. When you run the report, it looks down the column. Anything that differs from the $85, we'll get that formatting applied to it. And it sounds a little more complicated than it is, but it's just basically you're almost treating this as you're creating a filter. So you're doing you're sort of building as a filter, and just you're adding the extra step of when that state happens, such as not $85, it's going to apply that. So what you get in that end is you get that highlighting there. So just in this case, there was a lot of them that kind of showed up as non-85. But if you have a report that you're running where there's only a handful of options that are differing, you may want to do something like this just to call out those ones, just to call out those values that may differ from what you're expecting for the most part. So it may just be helpful to highlight it out so people can quickly, just eye scan and quickly find, okay, yeah, these are ones we need to address right now or for some other reason. So that may be helpful in many cases as well. And so that's the end of the formatting and customization piece on that. Any questions on any of those aspects that I brought up? Now, again, there's a whole universe of customization and formatting beyond that, but I wanted to try to highlight some of the things that I thought people would be more likely to use or maybe more helpful in providing context to the reports.
With the date timestamp, is that something you would have to manually change every time you run it, or does it automatically change it every time you run it?
I don't think it automatically changes because I think because you're setting that in the criteria tab, so you can pick for each column you can pick whatever the preferred date format is, and once you set that value in that, every time you run it, it should sort of inherit whatever you have picked. So when you go into the results tab, it should display as that particular date format. That's why it's good to sort of like bake some of these in at this in the report itself, and that way you can just kind of keep running it that way as well. So.
I think, were you asking about the timestamp, like the date the report was run?
Yes.
I think that's what she meant.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, if you're doing like the timestamp, like in the title part,
Yeah.
so yeah, that'll change. That'll just be like that is set to when the report is run.
Okay.
So if you do modifying the title with the timestamp, that'll be that will sort of like regenerate every time you run the report. So you'll get that new date and time at that point then. So that's why I find helpful to kind of just put that into the report. And I think that one's actually built in the results tab, but if it's a report that you and a lot of people are running on a regular basis, it may be useful to add that piece into the title, and that way you have like if you're looking at like you're saving all these to a folder, you'll have a little more information as to like when exactly it was run and what what the data state was at that day, that time, essentially. So I apologize, I misunderstood that first question.
Can I point out one thing that might be an easier way for the first thing you showed about the column, the row repeating?
Yeah,
You go
sure.
into the where you did the alternate row styling, right under there's a checkbox that says repeat cell values, and that'll repeat cell values across the whole spreadsheet, so you don't have to do it column by column.
Okay, yeah. That's a good point there. Yeah.
Where was
To
this?
See if I can-
Results view where the rows, the repeat, the alternate styling thing is.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's the way you did it, that you showed that's column by column. And then if you, Todd, go back to here to the end of your presentation, where you did the alternate row styling.
It's faster.
see.
Oh, not that one. Oh.
Is-
That's where it is. It's further down. Your screenshot cuts it off.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
right underneath there, there's another checkbox that says repeat cell values under that row style.
Yeah, that's a good point actually. Yeah, if you have a lot of that are going to be repeating. Yeah, I get. Sometimes I do that. A lot of times I just do a couple columns because a lot of times like almost all my columns are sort of distinct values and maybe one or two may be repeating. So, but yeah, if you're gonna do a report where there's a lot of columns that may repeat, then that's probably the better way to sort of format the entire report itself.
Could you share again how you get to that dialog box?
This one here, yeah. I wonder if I can actually. So this is if you're in the. Let's see if I can. I think if I want to switch over to the demo. It's if you're in the results tab, and yeah, and then if you go to there's the title container and then the table container. The table container, if you do the XYZ button there, that should bring up the options there. And I think my screenshot probably cut off some of it, and then it should be there should be an option there to sort of like repeat values.
Yeah, there is.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments at that point?
So once you change the column properties using the conditional formatting or whatever, it saves it for all your reports or just the one report you're working on?
Well, yeah, essentially for that report that you're working on.
Okay.
Yeah, it's. Although I believe there are ways, which I didn't know if it was within scope or not to get into in this session. There are ways I believe to sort of like to save. If you're doing a number of changes in your formatting, I believe there's ways to sort of save all those changes and then sort of apply them to either other columns or potentially other reports. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go that far into it or not for this session, but yeah, but there are ways I think where you can sort of like reduce some of your labor in terms of having to repeat it for each column. You can kind of like start with one and kind of like, and then sort of like cascade it out to other columns. If you want to apply essentially the same formatting per column, across like like maybe 5 columns out of your 10 or something like that. So so there are options to kind of get into that piece there. So
would that be kind of like a format template, like where you could actually save those specific values? Is that what you're saying? Like,
yeah, I believe so. I know some people may have like a better, can maybe articulate it better than I am. I don't know if people have had good success doing that.
Is it that you can borrow the formatting from another report? I know there are magical ways to share certain things that exist in other reports in the report you're working on, so it could be formatting too. We shouldn't talk about it if we don't know how to.
Yeah, I know. It's like, it's,
I like the magic.
yeah.
Yeah, magic.
Yeah.
It's magical until I understand it.
that was very cool.
See, I don't tend to use it as much because each report I build, I kind of like, I'm not typically repeating things from other reports, so I don't have a lot of experience doing that, so I tend to kind of just, apply the formatting I want for that report each time. But I think there are ways to kind of shortcut it, and that may be something we can sort of bring up at a later point or something, or cover. So yeah, I apologize, I don't have like a better answer for that, but I think there are options for doing that. So.